I'm Emilie Lunt, and I believe with my whole heart and soul that our homes are places where we can seek and love the truth, celebrate beauty, and learn good things every single day. That's why I'm educating my kids at home, and I know you can do it too. Welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool. Well, Debbie Park is my guest today. Debbie, thank you so much for being with us today. So Debbie and I met last summer at a church event for parents, and it was an event where we tackled the tough issues that are facing us today. So the gender issue, education, all of those good things. And I could tell right away that Debbie was a mama bear, kindred spirit. And so I'm really thrilled that you're here today. And the thing that kind of sealed the deal for me was I found out that you were going to start homeschooling your daughter last year. And so we really connected over that. But let's back up just a second and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, if you would, first.
Well, I have been married for almost 20 years. And I have 2 kids, 12 and 8, and I work full time.
Okay, so you're a busy lady.
Yes.
Very busy lady. So let's talk for just a second about your education and your husband's education, because I didn't realize until just a couple of months ago that you yourself were homeschooled all the way through. So tell us a little bit about what that was like.
It was wonderful. I don't ever remember wanting to go to public school. I had a friend that lived behind us, and she went to the school that lived right across from my parents' house.
Okay.
So I enjoyed it. I loved it.
And so it was probably at that time, because thinking back, so not to tell our age because ladies don't, but it was the early 90s time frame.
Yes.
And so homeschooling was different back then. What was it like before the internet, before all these resources were available?
Oh, you had a lot of workbooks. My mom had structure stuff where she would teach us and everything. As we got older, it was more independent work that we could do on our own, and it wasn't as strict on schedule. She had a flexibility there, so it was really nice just to be able to do
and work at your own pace.
Yeah. If something's getting frustrating, you can kind of take a break and come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always nice.
Do you remember why your parents decided to homeschool you back then?
Yes. My mom will tell you that God convicted her, that it was, that she just felt like she needed to do it, and she couldn't say no.
Yeah, which is so interesting because, again, I remember when I was younger, homeschooling was kind of weird back then. It wasn't as common as it was. And I think just the perception that people had about it was really different than what it was. So what are some misperceptions that you kind of dealt with about homeschoolers as you've gone through life?
That's a hard one because I really have never been asked weird questions. The major question is if you can spell really well.
Okay.
For some reason, people think
so
in one of my jobs, somebody asked me, are you a really good speller? And I'm like, well, I feel like I'm fairly decent, but I'm not winning spelling bees or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe people perceive that you would have gaps in your education that other kids might not have or something like that. That's pretty funny. So what was your least favorite part about homeschooling, if you had one?
There's not one I really recall.
So you just really enjoyed it, which is really fascinating that you loved it. So then what about Josh, your husband? What was his education like?
He was full public school.
Okay.
Everything. So.
All right. So then this is maybe kind of a funny question, but what did he think? Well, where did you guys meet?
We met at my sister's house.
Okay.
She had a Memorial Day gathering, and so we were there.
Okay. So was there a point where you told him, Josh, I was homeschooled, or did it just kind of normally? I've always wondered what that would be like, when it wasn't so common, what people
Right. We would get together, we were friends for a while, and so we would hang out. I'm sure he picked up on it at some point, or I told him, I don't remember. He said he will tell you when he met me that I was a little weird.
Okay.
So what he means by that is that I didn't have street smarts of what
Okay.
kids have, what they learn in the public school.
Okay. So you were kind of innocent. Or
a little bit,
naive,
or if those things came up, I'd be like, why is that even funny? Or it didn't matter to me. So it wasn't even in my thought process.
That's really interesting. You obviously got over it.
Yes.
You guys have been married almost 20 years.
Yes.
So remind me how old your girls are now.
12 and 8.
Okay, so 7th grade and 3rd grade.
Yeah, that's what they're going into.
Yeah, okay. All right, so years ago when you and Josh were making those initial decisions about your kids' education, what was that like? Did you consider options other than the public school, or did you just kind of go with the status quo?
We never talked about it.
Okay. Which I think is common, don't you? I
Yes.
think a lot of couples just kind of go along because everyone sends their kids to public school.
Our kids were in daycare, and it was kind of well, I've got to work, So like, how would we, function that? I remember my mother-in-law asking me if I was going to homeschool. But my mind was like, how am I going to do that if
So she asked you that because she knew that you had been homeschooled.
Right. Yeah. So when my daughter was getting closer to the kindergarten age, she's like, are you going to homeschool? And I was like, my mind was just like, there's no way possible. How can I function that?
Just because you knew that you needed to work. And also you told me, we were at the park with our kids the other day, and you told me something really sweet that you had told your older daughter about motherhood and when you had her, how you felt. Would you mind sharing that?
I'm trying to remember exactly, but what I told her was that when I had her, that was my purpose in life, was to have, like, be her mom, be her, parent, and raise her and everything like that. So,
and something really connected
yes,
in your heart with motherhood, which I think is really foundational to homeschooling. Your mom was convicted that she needed to live out her motherhood by homeschooling you, and it's not for everybody. But I think I brought that up because I think the groundwork and the seeds were very much there, right?
Right.
And so kind of fast forward to last summer, you and Josh decided to pull your oldest from public school and homeschool. And so was there something specific that happened that started that conversation last year?
I think it was a gradual thing over time. 2020, when she came home for second grade, was a major thing, and then when she went back to third grade, that was there were so many different questions of what you're seeing going on around you and who's in control of everything. So it started then. I was always concerned for her going to sixth grade. Sixth grade is
kind
where
of that middle school. In our community, sixth grade is a transition. So kids go to kindergarten to fifth grade, and that's in kind of an elementary situation. Middle school, which is different than how I grew up. Sixth grade and seventh and eighth are middle school. Right. And so that's a big transition to have little sixth graders with eighth graders. So I think that's a good point to bring up, though, because I hear a lot of parents saying, we'll get through elementary, and then when we get to middle school, that's when we might look at something different.
Right. Yeah. I had heard different things about our community of what the middle school was like. And I knew that wasn't like everything, or like that isn't, but I just knew it was so different. And so for a while, every year she got further on, I was just like, what's going to happen when she gets to sixth grade? What, we worked different schedules at the time. I was going to go back into an office, or depending on 2020 when it was. And so I was like, she might be home by herself for a little while. That made me nervous.
Because at that point, kids in our community were doing some days in school, some off, some remote learning. There were just all those crazy things that were happening due to COVID. Right. That just logistically were issues, not even to mention kind of the things that started to be laid bare about what was being taught and the issues that would concern us, the critical race theory, the gender theory, all of those things. So a lot happened in that year. So you guys started thinking about it. Were you and Josh on the same page at that point, or was there a lot of discussion that had happened to get there?
There was a lot of discussion. I was more for it, and he wasn't positive. In the beginning, he had the question of like, well, I went through public school, and I'm fine and everything like that. As time goes on and you see different things that have happened and people seeing how different the public school is now, and he was seeing those things, it made him kind of come on my side a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we're talking to people, and I know we've kind of, we being my husband and I have even felt this way at certain points, you feel a little bit defensive almost, maybe, because it's like, well, that's what I did and it was good enough for me, and I think I turned out okay. And there's that realization, like you just said, that it's not the same, right? It isn't the same public school system that we went through several years ago. And so what role did your faith and desire for your kids to have a Christian education play into that initial decision to bring Leah home?
That was a major one. I prayed a lot about that, and I listened to different podcasts and different things just convicting me, like, to disciple my children, and who is truly discipling my children. And we talk about influences in public school too. Yes, the teachers influence them, but your main influence are the children that are constantly around them. And a lot of those people don't have the same beliefs as well. So how are those beliefs falling on your children? And do they know how to, defend what they believe and not just go along with something else.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of the discussion that's happening right now around public school is kind of the institutional level. And so we know certain things and agendas are being pushed in through the curriculum and through, the federal funding and all of those things that we kind of know about. But it's harder to keep a pulse on the influences of the other kids.
Right.
And what they're bringing to the table also, and some of that's really good and some of it's concerning. And so I think that's a good thing for parents to think about as part of the big picture of what we're really looking at. So I'm interested to know, when did you guys bring Leah into the conversation? Was that from the beginning, or did you guys kind of decide and then tell her what was going to happen?
It was probably in the beginning a little bit. I actually remember in 4th grade, she was like crying to me one time saying that she didn't feel like she fit in and all this stuff. And she wished that she was homeschooled. And I was just like, I know, but, and at that time, I believe I had transitioned jobs where I was remote full time. So, but I was still like kind of new at the company. So I wasn't like gonna
rock the boat.
I was like, I need to get a grip on everything here first before we even consider that. But she really did. She wanted to be homeschooled early on. And so it was definitely talking to her and bringing her in, because I didn't want to have a fight. If a kid is so resistant to it, it's not going to be good for them.
Yeah, especially at that age, right? Like there's so much going on in a kid's life in that 6th grade, 7th grade range. A lot of emotions, a lot of hormones starting to get going, all of that. And so that relationship with your kid is so important. But it sounds like she was on board and ready to roll. And so is there any advice or lessons that you and Josh learned as you kind of navigated that with her, that other parents who are pulling kids at a similar age, that you might be able to share?
I mean, the main thing I feel like we did was just to tell her again, like, what the expectations were, making sure she understood she's always been a great kid of getting work done and wants it perfect and everything like that. And so I didn't think there would ever be an issue, like, really with her getting work done. But just so that she understood, it's not like you're going to be playing all the time or anything.
It's not the weekend every day at home. Like, we have things that need to get done. Yeah.
And I mentally prepare myself for things. So I try and mentally prepare them for things as well.
So just can manage those expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
And so just so that they understand and make sure you have those like boundaries of like, yeah, you can go take a break from time to time, but it's not going to be like, oh, I did like 5 minutes of work. I'm going to go take an hour break or
developing the discipline of being kind of a self-starter and all of those things. Yeah. So meanwhile, you've got your younger daughter, who at the time was getting ready to start 2nd grade, right?
Yep.
Is that right? So what did she think about that? Because she was going to go back to public school.
Right. She wanted to be home. She didn't understand why Leah could be homeschooled and she couldn't. And I tried to explain it to her as best as I could. I was like, as Josh and I had the conversation about bringing her home, we kind of originally thought 5th grade and out. And I was like, you need to be more self-efficient on things. I need, I don't have the full time to work with you on certain things all the time. So I was like, just at this point, and to get a balance of how it was going to work with Leah being home, I was like,
that's kind of a slow start, work your way into it. And so I guess now is a good time, because part of the reason that I really wanted you to come on and share your story is because you work full time from home and homeschool your kids. And so I think that scenario is becoming more and more common as people work from home, have the ability to work remotely. And also we're seeing the need to look at educational alternatives. Not everybody has the ability to have kind of the traditional homeschool setup, which is what it sounds like you grew up with, where your mom was at home teaching you and your dad was the primary breadwinner for the family. But that scenario, I wouldn't say the traditional scenario is becoming rare, but it's certainly not the only one. And so I think your story is really encouraging, because there might be parents who, what you just described, were thinking there's no way that we could ever make this work. But if we think outside the box, sometimes there are, right?
Yep.
So once you decided that you wanted to bring Leah home, did you have to make special arrangements with your company to do that?
No, not really. I mean, it doesn't affect my work through the day-to-day. When she has questions, or if there's, she wants me to look at different things, I tell her, hey, gotta wait until our break, or, she'll take lunch with me or after work. And that's the other thing is, like, homeschool, you don't have to be from 9 to 3
Right.
kind of day. It can be anytime during the week. You can work on it on the weekend if need to be. So it's a really nice flexible thing. And so there wasn't really anything set in stone there or anything. And I get my work done as I normally do.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a good point to bring up is I think we have to kind of untrain our brains to think of school as being Monday through Friday, like you said, 9 to 3, because it really can happen anytime. And I think for families who might be in a situation similar to yours, that's probably pretty freeing to think that through, that it doesn't have to happen then. And it can happen when it works for us. And I've heard lots of families who have dads that are firemen or, kind of not a normal schedule that they, may do school on Saturday and Sunday when he's at work and then have a weekend on other times. So I think there's a whole host of options there that are exciting for families as they look at these. So this is obviously not a super easy situation. You do have to think out of the box sometimes. So what are some of the things that you and Josh had to think through that might help families think through this process and discern whether this could work for them?
Oh, I think just the logistics of it, of how it's going to work, how independent can she go. And my husband does work 4 10-hour days, so he is off a couple of times during the week here and there. So he'll help with things as well. And like you said, retraining your brain to realize we can do this after work. I've done science after work.
Yeah, and that's okay. So does Josh help with his schooling at all?
He does. There are a couple of days I go into the office every now and then, and so on those days it's all him, and he built a volcano with her. And
yeah, perfect. those are the good dad science projects, right? Is there anything that you thought would be a really big deal or something difficult that turned out to be not anything to worry about?
Not that's come up that I can think of right now. I mean, the difficult thing right now is sometimes having to remember how to do certain math problems.
You're getting into the math that's getting a little harder. And is there anything that you didn't anticipate, that has been a challenge that you weren't anticipating?
Nothing's really come up.
Really. So this is working great. So I think that should be encouraging to people that, your daughter's older though. And I wonder, you probably couldn't bring a kindergartner home to do this, right?
Probably not.
It would be harder.
It would be harder,
yeah.
But I think you could probably figure out a little way.
Yeah, just depending on the kids.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah. So your encouragement would be, don't let it stop you.
I would feel like if God is convicting you to do it, there's going to be a way. He's going to show you a way of how to do it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to think about it. And I also think that, as we kind of walk through these big parenting decisions, and this is a huge one, that as we talk to people around us, that there are probably a lot of support systems that we wouldn't have anticipated that could come alongside us too. I think I found that several times at churches where I had a hole that I couldn't, fill in very easily. There's been a friend to walk alongside me in that. And that's probably true maybe with the littler kids.
Yeah.
Grandparents maybe could come in and help.
Exactly.
They always seem eager to help. So with the different schedule, one thing that you and I talked about at the park the other day is just that a lot of the traditional homeschool community things that people do, so the co-ops, the play dates, the park dates, the field trips, a lot of those do happen during traditional school hours. And so that might be a little hard for someone in your position. And so you were talking about how you handle that.
Yeah, so so they are signed up to go to, I don't know if it's called a co-op or not at our church.
Yeah, so our kids go to this same, it's a homeschool academy basically. It's called Discovery Homeschool Academy, and it's an enrichment program. And so it's a drop-off program. Our kids go one day a week on Tuesdays, and they do enrichment programs. So they do like physical education, social studies, STEM kind of experiments, science, that kind of thing. And it's purely enrichment. So it's not part of our curriculum. And so our girls go do that together on Tuesdays. And so it is a drop-off program. So that works great in your situation, because traditional co-ops, a lot of times moms teach.
Right. And yeah, I'm not able to do that. And I recruited my mother-in-law. She picks up my kid on Tuesdays and takes her. And then I take my lunch at 3:00 to go pick her up. Because I had to make sure I picked her up on time to get back to the house for when Jessica got off the bus.
So again, someone came in and was able to help you with that, which is encouraging. So besides a drop-off, I know you're planning a field trip. That's at a time, for later on in the summer. So this might be encouraging if there's nothing that exists, you plan it yourself. So tell us a little bit what you're doing with that.
So we're just planning a field trip, and I'm trying to get others see who all wants to go, and I'm just taking the day off. If I know enough in advance, I can take the day off. And I have even thought about, maybe I need to tell some homeschoolers, like, hey, we're going to get together on a Saturday. It doesn't have to be just for like people that are working. It can be for everybody. But then maybe more people would be able to come and kind of meet up.
Yeah, just on those days when it's more flexible for you. Because I think a lot of times moms tend to plan stuff, maybe like a morning park date. And I think that's a good lesson too for those of us who are maybe in more traditional scenarios, to be conscious of people who have a different schedule than us and make sure that we're including everybody in our homeschool community. Right. So I've learned a lot as I've thought this through with you. So an exciting thing for your family this upcoming school year, you're going to be transitioning Jessa, your younger daughter, out of public school into homeschool. And so you're going to have 2 kids to educate. So what does Jessa think about that? Is she excited?
Oh, she's definitely excited. Yeah. The last couple of weeks of school, she was ready for it to be over with. She was a little upset, like missing her teacher and stuff, but she is looking forward to it.
Yeah. And so I think that will add a whole new dynamic to the whole thing. So have you talked to Leah about that, just to kind of manage those expectations again?
Yes, Leah actually offered. She's like, well, I can help her with all sorts of stuff. And I told her, I was like, that is so sweet of you, and I love where your heart is at. I told her that's not her main priority, though. I was like, yes, you can completely help your sister, but I'm going to be like the main teacher if she has some questions and whatnot. So.
Yeah, so that'll be fun to work through that dynamic as a family, and lots of learning and lots of opportunities to be a self-starter, that kind of thing. I know my daughter and Jessa are the same age, and so I've noticed such a difference in her from the beginning of last school year to the end of this one, just in her ability to work independently. And so I think that's exciting for you guys as you embark on that new journey. So as we wrap up here, is there any encouragement that you want to offer parents who are considering homeschooling in circumstances that might not be traditional? What's your advice?
Just don't think that it can't happen, and just keep an open mind. And like I said, if God wants you to really do it, if you feel like you're being really convicted about it, then He will show you the way. And then as you're doing it too, do not compare yourself to the public school.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more, because we talked about that at the park the other day. Lots of conversations happened at the park the other day.
I did get to a point where I was stressing. We had changed the curriculum a little bit midway through, and so I was thinking, oh, she should have been like to a different spot than what she was, or she had talked to one of her friends and they were like going through a certain part of history that she wasn't yet. I was like, that's later on in your book. I'm like, the public school goes one way or this way. I'm like, it doesn't mean you're behind or anything like that. So don't think of it that way.
Just kind of release yourself from that comparison of we need to be here, because that's part of why we homeschool, right? To tailor things to what our kids need.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Well, I'm really excited about this new adventure for your family this year, and can't wait to walk alongside you and cheer you on. And I hope maybe a year from now you'll come back and fill us in on how that first year with 2 kiddos at home went.
I will be glad to come back and tell you all about it.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Debbie, and thank you for listening. I hope you'll join me next week for Heart and Soul Homeschool.
Heart and Soul Homeschool is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and guests, and not necessarily the views of the Herzog Foundation. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.